Husband's been secretly working on a new life in another state, planning to disappear without telling me, and I wish I could tell you it revealed itself like thunder, all spectacle and clarity, but it came like a draft under a door I thought was sealed. I'm Lena, 31, a city archivist who can date paper by the way it breathes and tell you which ink will outlive whose promises. And the only reason I even opened the drawer where the truth was hiding was because I needed a pen that writes on slick envelopes, the kind with the mean glue that laughs at ballpoints. The drawer stuck the way drawers do when they're full of warranties for appliances that already betrayed you, and when it finally gave, the contents jogged forward an inch like a confession. On top, a pale manila folder labeled Utilities in my husband's blocky hero handwriting. Our actual utilities live in the blue accordion in the hall closet because I am boring in the ways that keep roofs on. So the folder was lying. I put it on the counter, told myself I was being nosy, then thought about how if the city had respected privacy, half the collections I protect wouldn't exist and would have no idea how we arrived anywhere. That's how I talk myself into and out of things, with bureaucracy and romance. Inside, a printout of a lease application for a one-bedroom in a town I have never been to, 3 states away, where the winters look like a Dare Bozeman, along with a list written in black Sharpie titled Landing. Underneath it, DMV appointment, P.O. box, storage unit, Wi-Fi install, gym, co-work, and then, because the universe likes a flourish, start over. I didn't shout. My blood did a thing like fizzing soda, except warmer and meaner. The second page was a budget, first month's deposit, basic furniture, toolbox, linen, neutral, pantry staples, coffee grinder, as if I were an expensive spice. There were 2 moving quotes. 1 van rental reservation for a date 2 months from Tuesday. The pickup time was 7:30 a.m. like a clean conscience. In the pocket of the folder, something slid heavy against my thumb. I shook the folder gently and a key dropped out onto the countertop, bright new brass with a paper tag that read Unit 317 Lockridge Storage. I know those units, these little prosthetic basements for the stories we can't bear to have in the house. I'm not going to pretend virtue. I opened his laptop. The password is a joke about our cat, which on any other day is charming and on that day felt like insult and alibi. His calendar was spotless, which is how you know it's lying. The meetings were there but the travel wasn't. A tucked-away folder, utilities again, his favorite fig leaf, held PDFs for a bank account I'd never seen with a balance that spoke fluent planning. There were Craigslist drafts for a couch, gently used, mid-century style smoke-free home, a bike, a set of kitchen basics, and a coy line about must pick up by 6 p.m. Thursday. What couch? What basics? What Thursday? I walked to the window and watched our block be ordinary, dog walkers practicing apologies, a kid scootering like gravity is a rumor. The house was the same one that knew my sleep, my tea schedule, my tendency to sort stress into piles. My husband, Noah, texted the kind of texts marriages live on, home in an hour. Do you want that soup from the place with the napkins that feel like adult tissues? I wrote yes, and my thumbs didn't shake because my body believes in carrying the groceries even when the bag is ripping. I am good at seeing the difference between a copy and an original. People come to the archives to touch the firsts, the map with coffee stains from a surveyor's bad morning, the minutes from a meeting where someone misspelled unanimous as if foreshadowing dissent. You learn after enough years that the things that change the trajectory of a life rarely show up as declarations. They show up as an extra carbon copy in the envelope. They show up as a sticker that wasn't made for this century. His email had a folder named Classified, which would be cute if you were 12 and building a clubhouse. Inside, drafts of the conversation. Bullet points. Acknowledge her love of routine. Avoid saying disappear. Use I statements. Frame as necessary adventure. Don't mention the exact date to prevent scene. Say, I lost myself. And then a line that made my throat feel like a museum floor after a fire alarm. Leave note plus keys if she escalates. Escalates. The archivist part of me wrote the word down and circled it as if I were taking minutes at a meeting it would kill me to attend. I didn't confront him immediately because I am also my mother's daughter, and my mother taught me to choose daylight for first stabbings. I put the folder back exactly where I found it because that, too, is an archival practice, preserve the scene. Then I did something that makes me sound braver than I am. I drove to Lockridge Storage as if I were going to visit a friend. I rented a unit there once for the archives when a pipe burst and we needed to triage while the restoration team did their delicate heroics. I know the manager's face, a smile that can lift awkward confessions. The key slid into 317 like it had been waiting for my hand. Inside, the air that has no personality, the smell of new plywood and someone else's story. 3 cardboard boxes with new handwriting, Noah's. Box 1, kitchen spare. Inside, duplicates I didn't know we had, or maybe I had bought them and forgotten because adult life is a slow accumulation of spatulas. Box 2, books I'll take. He had chosen his own canon, and it did not include the ones we read aloud last winter when the power went and we used candles and pretended we lived in a century that apologized for itself. Box 3, memories. I didn't open that one because I wanted one thing left in the universe that didn't try to kill me. I sat on the cold concrete and made a very Lena kind of list, titles included. Explanations I will not accept, 1 midlife at 33 apparently. 2 the city is a treadmill. 3 men in my family leave quietly, it's tradition. 4 you were so busy loving the past you forgot to love me. We both know he rehearsed that one in the mirror. Then questions that are about me and therefore useful. 1 why did I not notice that Bozeman kept appearing on his weather app? 2 in what part of the day did we stop talking about nouns? 3 what do I want that has nothing to do with someone else's itinerary? When I got home, I cleaned the kitchen because it is my secular prayer. He arrived balancing soup like a waiter in our past life. He kissed the top of my head, which is his habit when he knows he's late and wants to sprinkle domestic confetti. I took the soup and put it on the table and said in the tone I use when I ask a donor if the diary they're offering is actually theirs to give, "What's in Bozeman?" He laughed gently, the way you laugh when your spouse misreads something small and you can fix it with charm. His mouth started to form a joke. I watched the muscles line up their punchline, and then I said, "I went to Unit 317, and his face did a thing faces do when they split between the person you sleep next to and the one who writes escalates about you. He put the bag down with a slow, deliberate respect, like it contained laboratories. "Okay," he said. "He Saturday, okay," he said again, as if the second one might have a different meaning. I didn't sit. I leaned on the counter because my knees did not deserve to have to choose sides. "I'm leaving," he said, and to his slight and stupid credit, he didn't add but. He added everything else. He added a speech about maps and stasis and how sometimes you wake up and realize your life has ossified around your good habits and you need to pry yourself out while the bones you need are still limber. He added that our city feels like a hallway he keeps walking and never arrives anywhere, and I wanted to make a presentation about how hallways are transitional by design and good things happen in spaces that don't pretend to be destinations. He added a memory I had forgotten. Us in our 20s driving through a state we couldn't name from the interstate, eating gas station grapes and making up futures. He had kept his promise to his own myth, and he had not told the woman who bought the car and the grapes and the groceries and the birthday cards. "Without telling me," I said, and I kept my voice calm like a clock. "That was the plan." He nodded. "I was going to," he started, then stopped because the sentences he had drafted sounded like the softest jail. "I didn't want to fight," he said, and I laughed, not kindly. "You wanted to pick your future like a pie flavor and avoid witnesses," I said. He winced, the small honest way a man does when you pin the exact ghost to the exact wall. "Why Bozeman?" I asked. "Why not anywhere that doesn't begin with leaving me?" He said things about mountains and air that smells like itself and a friend who had a co-work desk he could use. He said words about scale and breathing room. He did not say coward, so I said it for both of us. "Does anyone know?" I asked, and he said too quickly no, and then corrected it to "my brother," and then amended. I asked him about pickup trucks that don't break if you look at them wrong. The kinds of men who populate his family tell the truth accidentally first and on purpose second. "Do you love me?" I asked, not because it would fix anything, but because it's a bone you tap with a small hammer to see if it resonates like a living thing. "Yes," he said immediately, as if he had been practicing that syllable. "That has never," he tried to add a flourish. I put my hand up, palm like a stop sign. "Love is a verb," I said, which is something I hate saying because it sounds like a pillow in a therapist's waiting room, but here we were. Call the storage place, I said. Cancel the autopay. He blinked. We're negotiating now, he said, almost admiring. No, I said. We are doing practical things so I can decide whether to tell our landlord to take your name off the lease or mine. He nodded slowly, like the speed would make the shame distribute evenly. He called. He sounded like a man asking to undo a trick. He forwarded the cancellation confirmation to an email account with my name in it because I stood over him while he did. We ate the soup. It tasted exactly like a soup you eat the night you find out the person who knows the color of your winter coat was going to leave without folding it. We set an appointment with a couples therapist because I told him I would not be haunted by a ghost of a marriage he burned quietly. The therapist had a couch that made you behave and a clock that did not allow for speeches. She asked him to say the smallest true thing and he said, I didn't want to watch you watch me leave, and she asked me to say the smallest true thing and I said, I'm embarrassed I have to practice being the kind of person who gets left without being asked. She nodded like she was collecting specimens. She said we were not allowed to use phrases like start over or fresh slate because they were solvents, good at erasing stain but also detail. She gave us each an assignment, write a timeline but for feeling, not logistics. Not the date he reserved the van. The date he first typed Bozeman gyms into a search bar. Not the day I found the folder. The day I first noticed our kitchen conversations had become weather reports. I called my sister that night. I did not want to give her a mess, but she is the person who taught me how to hold big feelings with oven mitts. She listened. She asked if I was safe, if there had been meanness, if I needed her to bring Tupperware like love. She didn't tell me I had to leave or to stay. Do you want a bed here? She asked. Do you want me to drive you to a lawyer tomorrow just to see what your options smell like? Our love has always been transactional in the best way. You ask, you get, nobody itemizes. The lawyer was not a character from television. She was a woman with a plant on her window and a kind of math in her language. She said words like interim agreement, disclosure, best practice for not losing your mind. She told me to photograph everything I had touched that day and everything that might later pretend not to have existed, the folder, the key, the moving quote, the drafts of speeches. She told me to log into my own accounts and change the passwords not because I thought he would turn villainous, but because sometimes desperation was the face of a person you love. She said something like, decisiveness is often mistaken for cruelty by people who have enjoyed your patience, and I wrote it down because I archive sentences too. Noah started therapy on Tuesdays with a man who wears linen and doesn't let his clients turn their bad choices into radiantly tragic self-portraits. On Thursdays, we sat together with the clock and said sentences like, when you said nothing, I heard nothing, and when you held your plan like a secret, I felt like a spare key. She made us do something humiliating and helpful, draw a map of our apartment and circle the places where we still behaved like people who wanted to be there. The circles surprised me, the corner by the window where we stand with tea and do invented commentary about strangers' dogs, the shelf where he leaves the weird rocks he pockets on bad days, the hook where I keep the tote bag that has the library card from my first job frayed like a flag. He called his brother and said out loud where I could hear, I am not leaving. I said I was. I made a plan. It was a plan that included no witnesses. I'm telling you so that if I start romanticizing vans and mountains at family dinner, you are licensed to throw bread at me. His brother said something about bread being expensive these days and also okay, and I realized sarcasm is a love language even when you're bleeding. I kept going to the archives because someone's letters about the zoning fight in 1983 still matter, and I believe in institutions. I touched paper that had survived births and floods and men in ties who mispronounced neighborhoods. There is something humbling about handling minutes from a meeting where people made decisions that looked permanent and turned out not to be. I placed a photograph back in its sleeve and thought the city exists because people do not always do what they intend to do. One Wednesday, I went to Lockridge Storage and opened 317. I had closed the account. The door rolled up like an eyelid anyway because months on paper do not evaporate in hardware. The boxes were still there because the manager is kind and the schedule is stubborn. I opened Memories. Inside, the postcard from our road trip, 3 friendship bracelets a 6-year-old niece once made us, a Polaroid of my father holding a fish in the daylight of a lake that does not care about our stories, the ticket stub from a show we hated and kept loving to talk about, a map with a coffee stain, the coffee stain like an admission that an object had been alive. I closed the box quickly because reverence can turn into theater, and theater is not my religion. I took the key off my ring and left it on the concrete and told the unit thank you like a fool. I would love to tell you I forgave or I left or I did the clean thing a woman in a movie does where her hair learns how to be dramatic and the soundtrack implies closure. I did the small useful thing. I asked myself every morning, do I have enough dignity for today? And sometimes the answer was I will by noon. I told Noah, you may not change our return address without saying my name in the same sentence. I told my sister, don't let me make jokes every time, sometimes I need to be messy, and she texted back a photo of a mess and the caption practice. 3 weeks after the folder, I ran into a woman at the coffee place who was wearing a sweatshirt that said, Bozeman is for beginners. She caught me staring and said, it was a gift, I've never been. I said, me neither, and we smiled, 2 strangers relieved to be ordinary. Noah started cooking. Badly at first, then with competence, then with a certain humility that made me consider that the point of food is not to insult hunger but to sit with it. He apologized with receipts, not speeches. He cancelled the van, he forwarded the email, he let me watch him delete the town from his weather app without a lingering finger. He admitted the part he liked best about the new life was imagining himself unobserved. He also admitted that when he pictured unlocking the Bozeman apartment, he was not happier, he was simply unaccountable. The therapist called it an honesty that stings, I called it science. I took a weekend alone to the town by the river where my grandparents held hands on a bridge that has since been replaced by infrastructure that cares less about romance. I stayed in a small room with a bed that squeaked even when the wind sighed. I walked a loop around the town 3 times a day and waved at a woman who was also looping, and we never introduced ourselves because sometimes what you need is a human with no story. On the second morning, I sat in the public library and read through a pile of donated diaries from the 1970s, and the author, who loved her special pen, wrote about not running away exactly, but how easy it is to leave yourself in other people's decisions and then resent the distance. I wrote that down. I wrote it on my arm in pen that stains because my body needs reminders that don't wash off in hot water. When I came home, our house was still a house, which is a miracle, and Noah had put a note on the table that said, I bought the basil a new pot, and the basil looked like it had accepted the gesture. We sat at the window and did commentary on a dog in a sweater, and he asked if I wanted to drive out to see the meteors on Thursday because space doesn't care if you planned on being someone else by then. I said yes, with the caution of someone who is learning to RSVP to her own life. We did not burn the folder. We put it in a binder labeled documents that tried to leave before we could talk about them. We placed the binder on the shelf next to our lease and my passport and the menu from the diner that knows our names. Sometimes I take it down to remind myself that surviving a plan is also a skill. If you're reading this because there's a folder in your kitchen that thinks it is more interesting than your vows, here's the only sequence that has held me like a banister. Don't confront a ghost at midnight. Ask for nouns before metaphors. Bring daylight and a witness. Take photos. Write the timeline forward and backward. Go to the place that holds your name, your sister's couch, your lawyer's chair, your own bathtub, and speak it until your throat remembers. Choose one boundary you can. Enforce without applause. Eat food, drink water. Let the basil teach you that roots can be loosened and replanted without dying. Tonight I will close up the archives, lock the door to a building that has outlived everyone in its photographs, and walk home under a sky that is not making promises it can't keep. Noah will be at the stove trying to make lentils tender without giving up their shape. I will watch him like a scientist and a woman. We will talk about a sign downtown that uses the wrong apostrophe and laugh like conspirators in a minor decent crime. Later, if my hands get that runaway itch, I'll look at the map above our desk and find our city and place my finger there like a stamp. And if at 3 a.m. my chest remembers the van reservation, I will sit at the window and count the streetlights and practice the smallest vocabulary for belief. Here, still, again. And in the morning I'll water the basil, file a letter old enough to have been written with a fountain pen, and keep the door to the future ajar, not wide enough for a disappearance, but wide enough for us to walk through if we learn how to say we're going with both of our mouths.